And then next up, I have Anja Green, who is the Content Development Manager at Mango Languages. Take it away.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I will be talking a little bit about the language learning industry, so a slightly broader view. Give me a second to set up my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, perfect. Okay. So, give me 1 second. I'll just introduce myself really quick before I get started. My name is Anja Green. As he said, I lead the content development department at Mango Languages, and I'll tell you a little bit more about us as a company in a second. I was born and raised in Germany, so I'm bilingual. I raise a bilingual daughter. I have a master's degree in applied linguistics and translation from Leipzig University in Germany. And that really kicked off my journey that eventually took me to the United States, into the translation business for a while. So this was a really nice throwback from Shelley to my freelance days, and ultimately then to my work at Mango. I've been with that company for 12 years now, and I lead teams of linguists and subject matter experts who are all speakers of many, many different languages. And together we create our courses and our learning materials. But before I share a little bit more about Mango Languages and use it as sort of an example of what language work can look like in the private sector, specifically in the language learning industry, I want to take a step back and preface this with a little bit more about why languages are so important and what's triggering this need for people that are fluent in more than one language. And if you were here for the keynote, you already heard some great information about international business and mobility, but I'll just reiterate a few pieces of that because it's so relevant to careers in languages, and that demand for proficient speakers that we're seeing is higher today than it ever was before, despite technology solving so many of our communications problems that we still face today. With globalization, we're of course also seeing a lot of economic growth. We're seeing a growing interdependence of economies and of nations. And add to that the technological advances that we're seeing, and you have a really significant shift in labor markets around the world. Companies today just look different than they did 50 years ago, right? So many workplaces today are made up of multinational teams with team members from all types of backgrounds, speaking all kinds of different languages, sometimes even located in different countries around the world. And what you have then, as a result, is a need to create a workforce that can actually function in those kinds of environment. And that's also flexible enough to communicate in different languages if necessary. And on the other side, we're now seeing, of course, a growing immigrant population too. So we have a population that's essentially newcomers to this country and that need to be brought to a functional level of English first. And that obviously doesn't happen overnight. So in the early phase of their settlement here, you need an entire infrastructure to facilitate life for those newcomers in their language sometimes, while English isn't yet in a state where they can fend for themselves. And that infrastructure alone is so multifaceted that I can't really begin to list all the examples here, but just think, local government agencies, social workers, administrators, all of those people and agencies need to be able to facilitate effective communication with those newcomers. And we're not always doing that effectively yet, but I think as a society, we're starting to realize that there's a lot of work we still have to do in this space. Then you have tourism, of course, which kind of falls under globalization too, right? It's gotten so much easier and in some cases more affordable to travel. So much more of the world is open to us and invites us to explore and learn. And most importantly, the world really is just so much more connected now. We use social media and the internet in such new and creative ways that it has really changed how we meet and how we interact with other people. And this shift now opens doors and it affords us opportunities that we didn't have before necessarily. So it's become a major driver in these new types of job opportunities that fall really outside of traditional employment models that some of our parents grew up with. So we're seeing much, much more of that. These are, of course, just a few reasons for the language demand in the private sector, but I want to take you on a little bit of a deeper dive into what this can look like by introducing Mango Languages and sharing how we specifically use language talent. So if you haven't heard of Mango, we're a language learning organization that offers self-paced language courses in over 70 world languages and many different English courses as well. Our methodology is primarily focused on conversation and on authentic interactions so that learners become comfortable starting real-life conversations with native speakers fairly early on in their language learning journey. We offer Mango in various different markets. Public library is one of our major verticals where libraries basically subscribe to Mango and then offer the service to their patrons for free. We also have subscription models available for individuals. So if you want to check out your app stores, you can find us there and download the app and start learning, start subscribing. And of course, we also serve the corporate space. For us specifically, we're primarily working with the global mobility business, with relocation management companies who are in the business of helping employees get settled for work assignments overseas and so on. So here we provide a full package of services that cover the language piece of relocation and get those employees settled on their new assignment. The higher education space and K-12 education space are markets for us too. There we help students serve, of course, their English learner population, or we help the market serve their English learner population, and of course also their world language learners. And because we offer over 70 languages, that also sometimes helps them offer less commonly studied languages that otherwise maybe a school wouldn't be able to offer to their students. And because we serve these different markets, our programs vary a little bit from one market to the other. So we hire distinctly different language talents for each of those. So I'll get into that a little bit so you can see kind of the differences in the people we work with. So our Mango Classroom program is offered specifically to schools and universities. It includes our courses, of course, and then a few additional things like lesson planning materials, additional print exercises that are all created on top of our courses. They're centered around these topics in our courses. So in this space, we hire language experts who are native speakers or fluent speakers of their language to develop and edit the content of these courses. That's based on the Mango methodology, second language acquisition principles, the latest research, and so on. And then they also create these teacher resources, these additional lesson plans, classroom activities. So oftentimes these people will have a teaching background that's necessary. They need to have taught the language as well in order to create these ideal exercises that really work for a student and learning environment. And then, of course, they always also make updates and improvements to the course content. That's something that's ongoing in the background. For our corporate clients, and soon, ideally, hopefully also other markets, we're offering a live instruction program called Mango Live. And there we offer students around the world language training, either in group or in private classes. So for this, we hire language experts that teach the students in live sessions online. So they also prepare their language classes by creating activities and by customizing that learning content specifically for those students, assessing them, of course, and then also reporting on their progress as needed for whomever we're working with in that particular scenario. Our course content developers that I just mentioned and our Mango Live coaches are the biggest group of talent we're hiring for, but I want to show you just how many more roles there are, even just at Mango, a fairly small company, let alone other companies in the private sector. So as a language learning company, we of course often put out language related content on our social media and other channels. And oftentimes that content features specific language or culture items. So those are always either created by fluent speakers of the language or vetted by native speakers. So there's a lot of that involvement there. On social media, translations, we already just talked about. That, of course, is a huge field, something that's always necessary because our program interface is made available in the home languages of the learners studying our English courses. And this is something that you'll find in many global companies. Translation, localization is just such a major need in the private sector. All of our learning content, in our case, Mango's case, also is accompanied by audio. So we work with recording studios that employ voice talents from all over the world. Voiceover really is another interesting direction to go in with your language if you haven't thought about that. You don't necessarily always have to be a native speaker here, because there are so many needs for so many different types of things and backgrounds, dialects, and accents. You might just find a little niche there. It's something really interesting to look at and a fun thing to do. And lastly, in some companies, like Mango, for example, it's beneficial just to speak another language, regardless of whether you need that language in your immediate job duties. So at Mango, for example, we always look for candidates who speak or who are actively learning at least another language. And we do this because as a language learning company, we want our team members to know what it feels like to be a learner of a language and to empathize with the learner. And this long-term journey of studying a language, right? When you hit that first plateau and the second and third plateau and what that feels like, so that we can really build products that work for our customers. So as you can see, there are so many ways in which you can contribute and make a difference with your chosen language. And as Mr. Tooley said earlier, there are many paths to this type of globally oriented career, right? And just to reiterate his point, these careers really can be on any level. It doesn't just have to be leadership positions. And I hope I showed a little bit more of that. There are so many careers available. The world really is your oyster. And for those of you who speak maybe a language that's a little bit harder to find, you sometimes have your pick of the litter. You sometimes have very little competition in your field, and you can choose your clients, you can choose the projects you want to work on. So definitely keep up with your studies and keep an eye out for these types of opportunities that I mentioned, or for freelancing positions like Shelley talked about. There really is so much out there for you. I want to briefly maybe talk about what working at a company like Mango looks like, so you can kind of get a better picture of how all these different language talents come together at a company like ours. And this will just be a super brief glance. So we have an office that's located in Michigan, where a lot of our local folks work and maybe worked until the pandemic hit. We're going to reopen again soon, but that's still a little ways out. We have about 80 employees at the moment. Many local to Michigan, but quite a few around the US, like myself. I'm in Houston, Texas. And then those team members, as I mentioned, are either fluent in another language or actively studying one. And then we, of course, have a sea of freelancers, of contractors that I mentioned before, our course content developers, our Mango Live instructors, plus many other types of people we consult with for various different roles, linguists outside of our core linguist team, and so on. Those contractors aren't typically in the office. They work with us from their homes or offices around the world. And because most of our work can be done online, we're able to offer this remote working environment to almost anyone by using all these wonderful collaborative communication tools that we have today, Zoom, Slack, and so on. That's really making everyone's life so much easier. So if this kind of work interests you, check out our profile on Indeed. I think there's a link in the exhibitor profile for Mango in the directory for this event here. Check out our YouTube channel, our Instagram, and so on, just to see kind of what it's like to work for us, and also, of course, to see what jobs we posted. As I mentioned, sometimes we're looking for speakers of commonly and less commonly taught languages. So you can always check out our careers page on our website. Follow us on social media to stay up to date with what we're looking for. And if you have any questions or want to reach out to me directly, my email is here on the screen. You can email me at anja.green@mangolanguages.com and ask me anything you want. I'm happy to assist and answer more questions if we don't get to them today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Anya. That was awesome. One of the things that stood out to me from what you said is that it's not just about language fluency in another language, it's about understanding the experience that one goes through in learning another language, which is really different. As someone who's born fluent in another language, actually having to learn something new is not at all. It is still very difficult. Just because I speak two languages doesn't mean I know what it's like to have to learn something new.